This is KHOI 89.1 Story City Ames, and you're listening to I Am Able Iowa, where we discuss the ability and disability. I'm Nancy Baker Curtis, public school teacher, board president of the ARC of Iowa, and parent advocate. I will be your host for today. I'm also joined by my co-host, Zach Meekum, who comes to us from Allies in Advocacy. Today, we're going to be speaking with our guest, Crystal Beighley from the Iowa Educational Services for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And joining us in just a moment will be her colleague, Jhovanny Fermin, who is also an employee of Iesbvi and a person pursuing a career as a mobility specialist. Crystal, to kick it off, can you just share with us a little bit about your background, yourself, and how you came to work with Iesbvi?
So I live over in Dubuque, Iowa. And after college, family and things, I have my children, I ended up staying in the area and pursuing education. And I kind of came out into the field in that really big rush of elementary education teachers. So there wasn't many jobs available. So I actually will try to make this short because it's kind of a long story, but I'll make it short. I decided I was going to do substitute teaching for a while, or para teaching, anything available in the district to try and get on. And I got called right before the school year started by an elementary school, and they were looking for someone in special education. Well, I said I would take the substitute position, but I really didn't have a lot of experience in special education. My background was more early childhood, elementary, gen ed. So I said I'd love to take the position and, just sub until you find someone. I came in by the second day. I went to the principal and said, I want to apply for this job. It was working with a few students with visual impairment. And I just was really in love with it immediately. I took that position, and then I was kind of learning Braille along with them, with their teacher, the visually impaired from our agency. And I kept coming in and working with her and doing things. And eventually she said, we have this scholarship program. I think maybe you should apply. I applied. I got the scholarship and went on to pursue my teacher of visual impairment. And then eventually the agency had an opening in this role, which wasn't exactly what I was looking for. And they hired me, and here I am. So I've been here 7 years as the expanded learning program coordinator and athletics director. And I've got about 15 years total with students with visual impairment. So very freak thing that I ended up here, but I'm so happy I did.
One of the things that you said is that by day 2, you were just in love with this job.
Yes.
And so what was it specifically about this type of work that you were really drawn to?
I think just noticing that there wasn't a lot out there for these students. I mean, when I was in college, I never would have thought this was a field I'd go into. When I was in high school, I do know we had one student with visual impairment in my class, but I didn't see him very often. So I think just knowing that the access really isn't there and learning how to provide access and how much the kids enjoyed it and being able to do the things their peers were doing, I think that just really made me immediately want to do this.
Crystal, I really connect with you. So I'm a public school teacher. Zach's original degree was in public school and education, and he taught high school for a while. And so I think both of us can speak very strongly to that pursuit, going out there looking for a job, trying to get gainful employment. And I think when we all leave college, we're very like doe-eyed, right? Like we're going to go make change and make an impact. And you get in the classroom and you quickly realize it's not all, bells and angels hearkening, like playing harps, right? Like it's challenging. And even when you want to help kids, you don't always have the opportunity to impact kids with the way that you want to. But you said something when you were talking, and you mentioned about there weren't a lot of resources out there. But by day 2 of this job, you knew this is what you wanted to do. So it seems to me that there's a gap between teacher induction and training and how we prepare teachers to go into a variety of fields and employment opportunities, right? And then what is actually out there and the gaps and needs that need to be filled when it comes to servicing and providing equitable access to a high quality and viable curriculum. And so that just really connects with me. As I was thinking about what is the Iowa Educational Service for the Blind and Visually Impaired, I immediately in my head went, well, this has to be the AEA, right? Or maybe this is the Department for the Blind. But it's neither one of those things. And I think any other teacher or person who works in education might be having those same thoughts. So, can you talk to us a little bit about how the educational services for the blind and visually impaired are both similar and different from what the AEA or the Department for the Blind do for students in public schools today?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the best way to segue that is we are from the Iowa Braille School. So when the Iowa Braille School closed, our services evolved into being contracted by the AEAs. So we're not actually separate from the AEA. Our teachers of the visually impaired and our orientation and mobility specialists are actually contracted by the AEAs to serve the students in the school districts. I'm going to take a quick drink of water here. I apologize. And then the Department for the Blind is also something that's kind of evolving. We're all evolving in our roles right now. And the Department for the Blind at one point kind of primarily served that transition age and adults, and more focusing on employment, independent living skills, adjustment to blindness. But we partner, we also overlap in services, and they're expanding their services too. So I don't want to speak to exactly what they're doing now, because there's a lot of new stuff on both our sides, just, with government entities and where we are and whose roles are what. But we typically serve, we do serve students through school age. So once the student graduates from high school, they exit our services. So our services are primarily direct service itinerant model.
Can I back up just a little bit?
Yes.
I think that there's probably a lot of people on here that it never even occurs to them how blind people are instructed in schools. So obviously there aren't teachers qualified to teach Braille and cane travel in every public school. So can you just kind of explain a little bit more for a layman, what you're talking about when you're talking about working with these kids? What does that look like?
Yeah, I can talk about that. So it's obviously very individualized, and we, may consult with the schools, and in other cases, we're direct serve with a student where the teacher of the visually impaired is coming in and working with that student one-on-one at their public school, at their home school even, or private school, and teaching them Braille, large print, their other services, other expanded core curriculum, things that are part of their individualized education plan. So, And then orientation and mobility is also doing that same exact thing. So we work from an itinerant model in each AEA, and then those students our teacher of the visually impaired isn't, sometimes they might be, but typically not sitting in your classroom co-teaching with you. It's a separate pull-out service, kind of like speech pathology, but not like speech pathology.
Right. Just again for laymen, what's orientation and mobility?
Ooh, so orientation and mobility. I might pull Geo in pretty quick here. So orientation and mobility, which I am not. My background is teacher of visual impairment. I do work with that, but that is cane skills, travel around the community, transportation, career education. So it's more than just the skills we're working on building when we're, sitting still. It's how can we move about our environment.
And you referenced our guest who has just hopped on, Jhovanny Fermin. And so let's just take a moment and pause and throw it over to Geo. I call him Geo because we work together in the real world, and I think most folks do. But his God-given name is Jhovanny. So Jhovanny, would you please take a moment to introduce yourself and just talk a little bit about who you are, how you became involved with the Iowa Educational Services for the Blind and Visually Impaired, and then we'll continue on from there.
Yeah, hey guys. Thanks for having me. My name's Jhovanny Fermin. Most call me Geo. I'm 33 years of age, and I get the pleasure and honor to work closely with Nancy Baker Curtis at the Johnson Middle School, and then I work with Crystal with the Braille School, as part of our extended learning program as an intern. But I'm also on the path right now of working towards becoming an orientation and mobility specialist. And so, how I got started with the agency is my mother-in-law, Kim Stock. She's a teacher for the visually impaired, and she's been a part of the agency now for 10 years. And it just occurred like I was looking for a summer job opportunity, and she just knew my heart, my passion for working with kids. And she said, "Hey, the Braille School, they have camps in the summer, residential camps in the summer, where she was like, if you wanted to work with those kids, you can apply." And so through our intern program, I got connected with Crystal and applied and fell in love with our residential camp, Camp Abilities Iowa, and that's hosted at the University of Northern Iowa. Um, and it is a blast. It's an adaptive camp where the kids just get together. It's our biggest camp, residential camp, and the kids get together and man, they get active. From learning from some of the sports for the blind to rock wall climbing to dorm time, getting together and getting connected, socializing with the blind community, if you will, or with other friends that they've grown up with or that are around the state, across the state. Some of these kids have grown up together. Some of these kids, go to school together. Some of them they grow closer through sports. And I absolutely fell in love at that camp. And 7 years later now we're here, and my heart just grew, mainly because not just for the kids, but for the families and the staff. Uh, in my role now, I don't have that luxury to grow close with the families. Whereas when you work with the agency and you're a staff member, like you really get the opportunity to grow close with families, and you get that respect level, and vice versa. And it's really cool. And you see the kids in their heart, and you just grow to love them, and that's where I'm at now, and that's why I love working for the agency. It's been a blast. So.
What about, because there are lots of different forms of education. Um, so what specifically about education for the visually impaired, what draws you to that work in particular?
Just the aspect from the mobility, being able like to help them get around their environment. So like when you're in, I'm a campus monitor, so like if what that would look like as a mobility specialist is I would be able to help orientate a visually impaired student, be able to get around the building, be able to help them and teach them that cane travel, confidently, how to get from class to class, from class to the cafeteria, from even learning how to evacuate the building, confidently on their own. And then, also from like the aspect of, being downtown. How can you confidently, cross the streets, learning crosswalks, and being familiar with the downtown area. Taking the, if you're in the metro, you're taking the city bus, learning that way. And so, I'm an active guy, so that right there just drew me, knowing that I can go meet up with the kid, have a lesson where I can either do a lesson in the school, outside, no matter wherever the goals, wherever the needs are met, for that kid to be able to confidently use their cane and independently.
So if you're teaching mobility in particular, did you have
Correct.
to do a drop?
What was that?
Did you have to do a drop?
What do you mean by that?
Okay, maybe you did. I have a friend that teaches mobility.
Oh,
Um,
I'm not there yet. I'm currently in school right now. I'm finishing up with my teaching degree. I'll actually be done in May. And
oh,
I'll be student teaching next year. So, super excited. So, but I'm en route, so I will be going into the orientation mobility program, so
okay.
that way I can grow my skills. But I have had the wonderful opportunity to shadow um, one of our orientation mobility specialists here in the Des Moines area, Brian, who's phenomenal. And I got to just watch him and how he worked, and we were inside the building at one point working with the deaf blind student, and then at one point we were outside, working on cane skills in the grass and on the playground. And then just obviously working uh, camps and working our sports events. The certified staff, like the mobility specialists, they're always around. So I'm like a sponge every time they're around. So I just soak it in. I'm always listening, the verbiage, how they're instructing the kids, and things like that. So
And correct me if I'm wrong, but Gio, you're specifically able to pursue this degree that you're in because of the TEACH program, right?
yes,
Um,
so it does require a teaching license. And then I would have to move on to get my master's program for the orientation mobility license as well. So
and I think it just goes to show so many of the things you spoke about
yeah.
really talk about educating these students as whole people, right? So, Crystal, you mentioned that you're really supporting them during K through 12, but the skills that the mobility specialist teaches them really provide them not only with physical mobility in their surroundings and space, but it also gives them some upward mobility for their life, right? Because they're able to be independent. They're able to go out and do the things that they want to do and engage in. And it really resonated with me, Gio, when you said, I'm going to teach them how to safely evacuate a building. And I saw Crystal give a lot of great head gesturing. And I think about my own child who has an IEP and who has an evacuation plan in his IEP because he's not independently mobile yet, right? And how critical it is that you have people like the two of you working in the system to support learners and families to ensure that given some sort of unforeseen tragic event or emergency, everyone is educated and knows how to properly respond. And so I can just tell in our interview and from talking to both of you how passionate you both are about the roles that you play, how important it is for the students you service to have high quality access to all the same supports that all other students have that don't happen to have these disabilities, right? Crystal, your role, though, is not only the expanded learning coordinator, you're also the athletic director. And I know that Gio's a sporty guy. So it seems like kind of through that role of being the athletic director and perhaps organizing some of these events, camps, and programs, that's kind of how your worlds collided. Can you tell us a little bit more about the athletic program that you guys have and what that entails on a day-to-day basis?
I can. So, yeah, as Geo was speaking, we have a section of camp abilities, which is a camp for visually impaired and blind students, and it's a sports camp. That camp is really our segue and where we expose the younger kids that eventually might do some adapted sports teams for us. So we have our own teams. We're the Iowa Rams, and our teams are for students 7th grade through 12 plus. And what it is it's competitive sports teams where we travel to other states. So our competition is not within Iowa. It is all in other states at other state schools for the blind. We now have 14 states in our conference. I'm currently serving as the president of our conference. I will be finishing my term in January. I really have a different program than most of the other states because we're not a residential school anymore. So Geo is our goalball coach. We currently provide 6 adapted sports programs and activity programs. We have track and field, we have goalball, wrestling and cheerleading, bowling, swim, and forensics. And forensics is speech team. For those of you who don't know, our kids were very disappointed that it was not crime scene investigation. But we compete against these 13 other states. So coordinating is kind of crazy. We have to gather the students in a central location to practice. We have to work with local school districts to provide, access. I get with PE teachers and teach them how to play the sport so then the student can practice it with their peers. So it's really kind of really evolved to this huge thing. I mean, it's a very large program. We serve over 800 students, not in sports, but we serve over 800 students in total across the state of Iowa. And we're constantly recruiting them for these adapted sports programs. And every single student they're competing against is also blind or visually impaired. So that's kind of a background on how our programs work.
And that is so unique and different than what I think of when I think of other adaptive sports opportunities like Special Olympics, right?
Yes.
Because this is actually, it feels more like what you would think of like a high school sports program, right? It's also competitive, and not that Special Olympics is not competitive. I don't want to insinuate that.
Correct.
But it would, I think that this would be incredibly empowering for students to be able to participate in traditional quote unquote athletics with peers in their own, and it's competitive. So can you just talk, both of you, a little bit about how the students respond to being able to participate in these athletic activities and programs? Some of the things that have really kind of resonated with you, or a moment that stands out where you could just see a kid find themselves through athletics and programs like this.
I have a quick story I can tell that is one of our favorites. I mean, we have a million, honestly. We always joke that we need to keep a running doc of all the things that happen, all the great things, all the silly things. But because this isn't just about athletics, this is about students, getting out of state and getting independent, getting social as well. We kind of go back to that whole camp abilities as kind of our recruiting spot because that accepts younger students and we're trying to prepare them. We had a student who joined camp abilities and had not been overly excited to attend this adapted sports camp because they told us they didn't like sports. They did not enjoy them. were not too excited. This particular student ended up being extremely athletic and had just never been given an opportunity to have the proper modifications and adaptations in place. And by day three, well, I think by day one, we were already recruiting this student to be on our goalball team, and saying, "Hey, you're," the student had happy tears and said, "I've never been told I've been good at a sport, ever, and thank you so much." And that student has since graduated and gone on to live their life. But that student ended up joining their school wrestling team too. After doing it with us and doing the sports with us, they gained the confidence to actually join their school's team too. So that I thought that was really awesome.
You've talked about a couple different sports, and I know that Gio and I have had some conversations in the hallway. You're talking about goal ball. What's goal ball? Tell me more.
All right, coach, you're
Yeah.
up.
All right. Goalball is, in fact, if not, the popular sport for the blind. Um, and it originated in Europe. But how it's played, it's on a basketball court, if you will, about a 9 by 18 length of a court, and you're the kids. It's 3-on-3, and the kids are wearing, for equipment purposes, they're wearing blacked out shades. They're wearing chest pads and elbow pads and knee pads. Because the ball that they're using to roll it from one end to the other is heavy, and it's got a bell in it. So the game is typically quiet. It's an auditory game, so they're listening for that ball. And as one team is throwing, the other team is defending, trying to block the ball from a goalpost. And so a goalpost, and I like to compare it to like a soccer goal, if you will. And it is fun. It's fun. It's so fun that like you don't have to be visually impaired to play. I can just grab a bunch of sighted people, throw on some goggles, and play the game. And in fact, we had a representative from the USABA, which is the gosh, I can't remember. Chris,
Yeah, I got you.
I always stumble on the acronym.
United States Association of Blind Athletes, and
Yes.
he's also was a Paralympic competitor.
Who was at our tournament in Minnesota in October, and was just there with the kids, with about 4 or 5 different schools there, and was there just there to support, there to give tips, there to share his story, and just talk about empowering, right? Talk about like reminding kids how able they are in that sport, in their talents and their skills, but also like telling the kids like, hey, you don't have to be done with goalball after high school. Like you can keep playing goalball, like in rec leagues. You can keep playing goalball, like in colleges, if you will, or if you wanted to pursue goalball, playing with the USABA, like there's that too. So like, and that just like grew my heart even more for the sport. I'm a 30. This is my third year as a coach, and I'm surrounded by coaches who have been coaching for 10, 20 plus years. And I'm just like a sponge. I'm always learning, but it's such a fun time. And yeah, so my goal ball season is typically October to November, and our competitions are at Missouri School for the Blind. So we have those 13 other schools that are there in attendance, and we're competing and just having a good time. But if I may, like my favorite part about our competitions have to be like the social parties. So like after a competition and the awards, kids get all cleaned up, they dress up nicely, and then we have a social party where they get together and just have a good old time and get connected with other kids in their school. And you just sit back and you watch that, and then you're in awe. Like the conversations that they have, the time that they're catching up or getting to learn to know each other. Like those are the moments where you're like, man, I'm just thankful to be a part of this program. So
I think like a program like this, to use probably a loftier word than necessary. Really like help students become self-actualized, right? Like I think every kid needs like a path to pursue what I would call excellence, right? Be that music, sports, whatever. Um, and I think a lot of times disabled kids are kind of left out of those pursuits. And so, are there any experiences where you've kind of seen that self actualization happen because a student finally has like an outlet for it?
I would say we see it on a regular basis. I think that that's one of the best parts of this job is I feel like it's that instant growth. I feel like we're always seeing growth and access and that aha moment. There's people out there for me. There's friends out there for me. I really don't like sports or cheering or speeches, but boy, I love the friend group that I've met and I want to be there and I want to be part of this and be where I feel like I can be myself and not be the blind kid. So yeah, I mean, I could not state just one because I really feel like we see it pretty consistently as soon as we get the kids involved in our services and we get them around other kids.
And then just to follow up with that, I mentioned like the families, right? The families that we get to grow close with. And just to follow up with Crystal saying, then you get those emails from the parents that are like, thank you so much, right? My kid, loves go ball. My kid loves going to track, because of you guys and the friend group, right? And that's what it's about, right? So yeah.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to I Am Able Iowa, and we're speaking with Crystal Beighley from the Iowa Educational Services for the blind and visually impaired, along with Jhovanny Fermin. He is an employee for the Iesbvi, and he's also someone who's pursuing his degree as a teacher and future mobility specialist. I want to thank you both so much for being here. And I just find this conversation to be so captivating, but also so important. And I think people really need to hear about programs like this and understand why these programs are so critical as a support and a complement to the education that these students are currently receiving through their regular school, whether it be public, private. Um, so, one of the things that I'm thinking about are just some of the misconceptions that people have when you work with people who are blind or visually impaired. I'm sure I have them myself, and so part of what we like to do is dispel myths about disability as well as bring awareness. So, can you talk to us a little bit about those misconceptions that folks have when it comes to working with students who have blindness and visual impairment?
I think we've both got a few. I can give a couple of myths really quick. We don't know sign language. I don't know why, but us as employees, and I shouldn't say we don't all. They're definitely we definitely have staff that do know sign language. As a majority, we do not. And automatically, whenever we tell people that we work with the visually impaired, the first thing they say is, "Oh, so you know sign language?" Not necessarily. I do know Braille, and then also that people that are blind need to feel your face. That's also not a thing. That I feel like that needs to be said because people say that to me all the time. But also just to not ignore people that are blind. They are not deaf. They hear you. You should be talking to them and not the person with them. I think that's probably a huge one. And they'll ask for help if they need it. Obviously, don't let someone walk into traffic or something, but never put your hands on a person without asking if they need help because they most likely don't want it and they are, getting around, moving on their own very independently, and just, keep your hands to yourself. Gio, you got some?
Well, you just took that one right out of my mouth there. Don't always assume that a person traveling with a cane needs help. Um, but yeah, no, I think that was going to be the one I was going to share. Um, yeah, so thank you, Crystal.
And I'm sure Zach can share some of his own myths when it comes to having a disability. We don't all need to bend down to talk to you, right, Zach?
Right, exactly. Yeah. And just, the question that I get asked all the time is like, who brought you here? And the answer is like, me. I did. Um, so yeah, all the time, just little things. Um, but I think like the thing that I always try to remember, particularly with blind individuals, is that the Iowa Department for the Blind has a wood shop in their school. And like these blind individuals are taught and trusted with like the most dangerous power tools there are. Like I know fully sighted people that are scared of a table saw, but there are blind people using them at the Department of Blind. So just whatever misconceptions you have about what a blind person is capable of, forget them. You know.
I'm
That
so
was
glad that you said
perfect.
that. I'm so glad that you said that. I'm so glad that you've all said everything that you've said because I think dispelling the stereotypes and the myths are so important, right? You said we don't all know sign language. And I immediately thought, is this because they all think Helen Keller? Right? Like you have to be blind and deaf at the same time, or because you're blind, you're obviously intellectually disabled too. Like, not all disabilities exist as comorbidities, right? You could just be blind and need an accommodation or a modification to be better included into what you're doing. So I kind of want to go down that path. I spend my days in a public school. As soon as I leave here, I'm running over for a special school board meeting because that's where I spend my nights. And one of the things that I'm very passionate about are helping our schools and our communities be more aware and supportive around inclusion and accessibility for people with disabilities. So if you guys could give some advice to someone like me or the school district that I'm going to go and represent and the constituents I represent on the school board, what would you tell us? What advice would you give us as a system to make the world better for the students that you service?
Just trying not to take his thought. I feel like I took Gio's sentence from him before, so I was trying to wait. I think really just include the students. They don't need to stand off to the side while you do the activity. I mean, they should be right there in the thick of it. And yeah, sometimes they might trip, but so might the other student. That's just part of how we learn. And just say hi, put yourself out there, introduce yourself, say your name when you're talking, just little things like that really in the community, in the schools. I think that helps so much. And I think that applies to everyone with disabilities is, just say hi, start the conversation. Most people, they want to be included too.
And I just think for like, uh, as a future mobility specialist for direction purposes, not only are you starting that conversation, but if you're inviting them something, you can verbally say, "Hey, I am heading here down to the cafeteria. It's going to be down this hall. So if you want to, just walk with me, you don't need to guide them. You can verbally say, "Hey, I'm walking down this hall," and they will follow your voice just like a normal person would just walk alongside with you, right? And then you're just kind of like, okay, just casually having a conversation. We're coming up on the left here. We're gonna hang a left, at the next hall, and then they're able to. They're aware. They're independent. right? And then they don't also feel like, oh, this, I'm being guided by somebody. No, they can guide themselves unless they ask to be guided. And so typically that's how we do things. Like we, wait for kids to ask to be guided. We don't just automatically assume like, oh, hey, you need to be guided somewhere. Because we always want to best assume that they're independent, but always working towards those independent skills as well. So
You talk, Zach spoke a little bit about that self-actualization. Um, you talked about narrating and asking permission, engaging with the person who has that specific disability, and asking them. And if we're talking with older students, right, 7th through 12th grade, that's when you can start to do that. But obviously, that's not always possible with younger kids. So if we are working with a younger student who has a visual impairment, and they're still trying to find their autonomy themselves, right? How do we approach that? Because we have different age groups here, right? And so how do we want to be respectful and receptive, but we also want to encourage in those younger people to have those skills and self-advocacy skills for the future. So how do you do that with the younger student?
I think a lot of it with the younger students is just um, making sure you have the same expectations as their peers. So, and adding that narrative piece, like Gio said, um, we learn so much visually, and our students don't get that same access. So when they're little and things are going on, we just have to be a little more narrative about it and to help them gain that independence and work towards that independence, just like we want all of our children to. So I think, just we've seen over the years that the students that are treated like their peers tend to be more independent because they have the same expectations. Obviously, that, goes without saying, still including, things that they need, the access that they need. But if we're, treating them completely differently, then they're going to act completely differently. So I just think that's important.
I totally agree with that. And I think about like, we're talking about guiding somebody and assuming that they need guidance. And maybe one of these students does need guidance, but they're not willing to ask. It's not the end of the world if they get lost. And that might be a lesson that they need to learn. I think kind of my frustration with the way disabled kids are treated is that this like maternal instinct
Yeah.
that we have shields them from failure, which shields them from learning. And really, it's like train travel in particular is interesting because it's a lot of like correcting yourself over and over again iteratively. So in a way, it's like necessitates failure.
Yes. And we definitely let that happen. I mean, we will repeatedly remind students to use their cane appropriately. And it will come because that honestly is the way we want it to go. We want them to be using their cane, moving independently. We want them to not need a human guide. And it gets to a point we want them to be safe, but we are going to be like, okay, you're not moving your cane. You've had reminders. There will be a consequence. There's items you're missing. And if we're just constantly there to pick up and to move and get everyone out of the way, they're going to assume that they never have to use their cane. They never have to do the things on their own. We always say it's the magician, oh, my book's here and it's open to the page I need. And, everything just appears when they need it. And that's just not how life is, when they're out adults in the world. We want them to have careers and have families and move about the community on their own. So yeah, I think that's really huge to talk about. Absolutely.
And I think that's the beauty about what we get to do in all the programs and all the ways we service the kids and when we're with them is that no matter what, we're constantly modeling. So like, modeling if you're a mobility specialist, modeling if you're at a camp, if you're at home, you're teaching families how they can, model for their kids, teach them those independent skills so that they're confidently able, to move around the house or wherever they're moving around or wherever they need to go or they're just confidently able to use that cane. Just by constant modeling. So yeah, that's the beauty in what we get to do. And so we challenge and we encourage these kids, but the beauty is just seeing their growth and their progress, and seeing how they're able to like just independently move around their environment. So
And life is filled full of natural consequences, right? I mean, the reality is you don't do your homework, you fail the class, right? Or if you don't move your cane, you trip over the item. And while you don't want anyone to get hurt, allowing them to not experience those natural consequences in itself has a greater consequence, which is teaching them learned helplessness, right? And we want people who can self actualize. We want people, as you said, who can go out and be active participants in their communities. These are employable people who are asset added to their communities, right?
I I love this conversation. I do want to ask and maybe kind of help us move that. I want to make sure the right people are getting the right message. We'll put it that way. Um, so we're talking about this paternal instinct and how we want to protect children, but it often shields them from failure. I'm guessing in your line of work, you probably see this a lot, not just from school districts, but also probably sometimes parents, right? Um, we love teachers, we love parents, but sometimes uh, the desire to protect people with disabilities and to say, no, they can't do this makes students become a self fulfilling prophecy. So, what would your message be to those parents and students that worry for their kids and might be harming them in the process?
I think the biggest thing is just, let them. You want them to be confident in their world. You don't want them to feel like they can't move forward, that they're not able to use the stove. I mean, another big part of my job is independent living skills and, learning the cooking and the things like that. So we need to get those because by you modeling that, your child is sensing that so that your child is thinking, oh, I can't do that. I'm not able to do that. I'm blind. I can't do that. And that's just it's not true. And we want them to be able to fulfill that. Like we want that confidence. We want that independence. So I know it's scary. I'm a mom. It's scary no matter what. We want to protect our children from everything. But we're doing them a disservice at the end of the day. So let's just, keep pushing them, keep moving that bar and keep setting it higher.
I often say to the parents of my middle school students, it's not failure, it's hard learning and safe parameters, right? And that we just need them to learn some hard lessons. And we need them to learn them now when we can buoy and we can support and we can provide guidance and we can reteach and reinstruct and intervene because right now they're safe. they're with us, and this is middle school. And not that it doesn't matter, but like we're learning life skills here, people. It's not about verb conjugation. It's like, can you start something and can you finish something and can you be proud and put quality into your work? And I think that that's really what we're talking about, right? Is like we're teaching people who have really some obstacles to overcome how to be gritty and resilient and to overcome those obstacles because they're capable and gosh darn it, they're just worth it, right?
Yeah. When a grown up fails, the consequences could be dire, right? But there's no safer time to fail than when you're a kid.
And I just like to say it's not failure, right? It's learning. So I kind of want to change gears a little bit because first of all, this is captivating conversation, which is why I was so persistent with having you people on. Um, but I really think we need to make sure that our listeners understand, right? We need to get the message out to the people who are out there who, they don't see these folks in their communities and they don't see these kids in their schools. Doesn't mean that these students don't exist just because they don't see them. And part of that is what we are trying to do is break that inaccessibility cycle and barrier that's out there, right? We're talking about barriers. So if we're talking to our listeners right now, how can listeners support the work that you all do and what your team is doing for these students, either through the actual educational service model or the athletic program model? What can we do to support you all?
I think there's some really great ways you can support us. We love partnering with community organizations, other programs, schools. I come into schools all the time and teach kids how to play sports or how to do the adaptive cooking and just kind of learn about our students. And another thing is just really, getting out there and recognizing that these supports are not permanent. Like we have to keep fighting to keep them in place. Like we all work really, really hard to make sure that everyone is getting the access that they need. And you can also volunteer with us. We have an intern program that Gio mentioned. So we do accept volunteers at our summer camps and our events during the school year, which we do expanded learning events, excuse me, during the school year that incorporate the students' IEP goals. It might be an adapted cooking lesson. It might be going out into the world and doing some, exploring and different things like that. But we do take on volunteers and college students, and we have paid internships. Those are different things that you can do to get involved.
And so just looking ahead in the future, um, what sort of innovations, what sort of future kind of opportunities would you love to see in the mobility specialist training field, Gio? You're in school right now, so it's kind of cutting edge, but it seems like you're somebody because you're a sponge. You're always there listening, looking, learning, you have some prior knowledge as well. So as you're endeavoring into become this new role as a mobility specialist, what do you wish or what changes do you see coming down the pipeline?
More places, I would encourage that more places would be aware of visually impaired people and just make things accessible for them. And not just kind of assume like, hey, like, if I notice a blind person walking in, oh, like, would they need this? No, like it should be automatic, like, or, it should be included like no matter what. So like no matter where a blind person should be walking in, they should have some braille on the wall where they could read a menu, where they can if they're at a hotel, they can those numbers are on the room on the on the walls, on next to the rooms, like everything's accessible for them, like no matter what. And yeah, that's my spiel. I mean, I can go on about that, but just to be more aware, and to help them be more included in that realm there.
I identify with that. I wish every single congregate setting had a height adjustable adult size changing table, right? So we can always, everybody has access, and I think about so many of the programs that are out there in the world, and it's something like a restroom that's such a simple barrier. And so just being able to navigate your space, right? Being able to read the menu, not needing it to be read to you. So many things that are just should just be standard, right? Because when we know better, we should just do better. I just, again, I love this conversation, and we just have about 5 minutes left in our program. And so, what message would either one of you share with someone who might be unsure about what students with visual impairment are truly capable of? They come to you and they say, well, I've been teaching for 40 years and that kid just can't do this. Because obviously, we always have some of those fundamentalists who just, or sticks in the mud, who just don't want to believe that students with disabilities have capability. So, what message would you share with someone who's just unsure about what some students with visual impairment are truly capable of?
Uh, I I would just say, uh, treat them as if they were a normal person. I treat them as if you saw a sighted person walk through the door, and have that conversation and introduce yourself, um, and just get to know them. And then through those conversations, you will get to know them, and that'll leave room for conversation, possibly about their visual impairments and stuff like that. But don't treat them any different, because they're not. Um, so.
No, I was gonna say, and I think something else to put out there is, do a little research. I mean, we have so much access to technology now, and I mean, I have students out there tearing around on dirt bikes and circling back to what Zach said, making beautiful things in wood shop and working with some really crazy, dangerous tools that I'm not even comfortable with. So, there there is a lot out there now. And then also knowing that there's, our students are capable, but they all need different things. And just because someone doesn't look blind doesn't mean that they don't have a visual impairment. That's another, big thing to notice. It's such a spectrum, we have a lot of that too.
Uh, that's so great. I appreciate both of you. I know that you're professionals in the field, so can I for a moment say what you made me want to say, but can't? Um, And that is that teacher that's fundamentalist is not a fundamentalist. They're lazy. They don't want to. They don't want to extend themselves. They don't want to do the extra stuff required to accommodate a student, and they're willing to use whatever excuse they can to keep doing what they're doing because they're set in their ways and lazy. That's my feelings on that.
And that is why we have a variety of people on the show and people that aren't employed with the agency that can speak freely, as well as those that follow the set protocol and rules established by their employers. But ultimately, I think that this conversation has been truly captivating, and I just want to thank you both for being on the show today. This is KHOI Story City Ames, and you've been listening to I Am Able Iowa. I Am Able Iowa airs on the first and last Saturday morning of each month at 9 a.m. on KHOI 89.1 FM. You can also hear us streaming live online on khoifm.org. We invite you to share your comments, questions, and program ideas with us at doug@thearcofiowa.org. And if you visit www.thearcofiowa.org, you'll find previous episodes and more information about our program. I Am Able Iowa is produced by the Arc of Iowa, headquartered in Des Moines, Iowa, with local chapters here in Ames and across the state. Thank you for listening, and until the next time, this is Nancy Baker Curtis and Zach Meekum saying, "You are able, Iowa."